Hey, I'm Kristen Parker. I'm a traditional recurve shooter. It's just me and my bow. So we begin week 3. I went to I went to a new range and found my home range, and then they had a 3D recreational shootout event. Had prizes and things like that with the 3D targets out back, and it was really fun. The kids loved it. The adults enjoyed it too. I didn't shoot this one, but I did want to go by and check it out and see what it was all about. This range likes to have a lot of practice shoots and everything. So I ended up starting the next day, 100 arrows a day for 30 days challenge, to work on what all I had learned from the group beginner class and the private lesson. And so the left and right spread has reduced greatly, so I was working on my top and bottom spread too. So as you see, my groupings became more consistent. I more consistently center target. I started with a clean target. These are just some different shots of different rounds that I did on my first day. So I definitely recommend classes in the beginning. And this was just from one group beginner class and one personal coaching session. And both classes combined were less than $100 in my local area. So it's pretty good investment, good deal. I was shooting with 10 arrows, so I had 10 rounds with 10 arrows to give me the 100 arrows. And then there's my arm. I completely healed from the prior injury from the string slap. Now I just have a little bit of a bruise from grazing my forearm. Day 2 was fun as well. I was real excited, thought I'd made some great progress. So here's some videos that I took, just so you could see what I was doing. Again, I was shooting fast because it's just familiarization. I am aiming a little bit more now, but I'm trying not to overthink it because I'm still just focusing on form now that I've been instructed on what the correct form is, more so than just briefly. So I do still have physical strength limitations, so things were not as fluid and smooth as they should have been. My release, there was a little bit more follow through and natural pop back from the release hand, but still not where it should be. The bow is a little bit more stable, but I didn't notice a lot of progress from the week before. Still have to be conscious about my grip. I had not found my stance yet, so I still felt a little unstable through these shots, but I wasn't able to really identify it and pinpoint why and what I needed to change at this point. I was still trying to just put all the pieces together and get all the motions together in one fluid motion. Again, you want to raise the bow before you draw it, putting a little bit of tension on the bow string and the bow riser is good, but you don't want to have a full draw or even a half draw, just enough to where that you have some tension. The bow is nestled in your hand without you gripping it, and the arrow is mounted on the string. You don't want to draw any further back than minimally needed until you raise that bow up and get ready to fire. I wasn't as square on to the target as I wanted to be when it came to my hips and all. I do have a lot of twisting still happening, very unstable. But a lot of progress since the first week. This is another round we cut to. Again, I wanted to show you my full-length little videos that I did so that I can judge my form and see what I'm doing, so that you have a better idea of the natural process of it and the natural process of learning. So there's a lot of experts out there, and especially online, and not a whole lot will show you that the process of learning archery is unique in many ways, especially traditional archery. So when you get the advice and the tips and things like that from some others, you may feel, as I did, that it's like you're already expected to know it, so just, here's my tip and just do it. And it doesn't necessarily work that way until you get a better understanding, and then you can go, oh, I see what you're saying, compared to what I'm doing, and then you're able to correct it. So if you don't realize what you're doing, even if somebody points it out, it's very hard to troubleshoot and fix. So I wanted you to kind of see what my process is through the whole thing. And it's a lot of repetitive motion. Each shot has its own adjustment according to how you feel. You're like, okay, I don't like how I feel when I pull the string back this way, so I'm going to fix that and see if I can find a more comfortable position within the recommended form. And so you just do that with whatever it is, whether it's your stance, any twisting, where that elbow, that drawing elbow is, your finger position on the string, to your grip on the bow and things like that. It's just a lot of repetition. That's why I like this challenge, because it gave me that regular, repetitious opportunity to learn the bow, and to find out, wait a minute, this doesn't feel so right, and then find ways that may feel better and produce better results. We're starting to get the hang of bringing that elbow back behind the arrow. That does not mean behind, they say behind the arrow line, and I think that's a little misleading unless you know what they're talking about, really. Is that you don't want to bring your elbow like on the other side, like the inner side of the arrow. You want to bring your elbow directly behind that arrow, so that your elbow, your wrist, your fingers, the arrow, the string, and your shoulders, both shoulders, your hips, everything, your nose, all of it, your arms point towards that target. So if something's off, that's going to reduce your accuracy in shooting. So your elbow should be directly behind and in line with the arrow, not on the inside of the arrow, like behind that line if you're looking at it horizontally or something. No, it needs to be directly behind and in line with that arrow. Otherwise, you're overextending, and it's going to throw your shoulders out, your wrists out, your bowstring won't be pulling back straight. And I think it's because one reason why I'm not necessarily pulling the string back as straight as I should is because I don't have that elbow consistently right behind and in line with that arrow. So I tend to pull to the right, which the arrow will fly off the shelf or off the rest, and that's because I'm pulling the string at an angle, outside, away from me. And so my shots, what's happening is that I've got a lot of horizontal vibration in the string, and it grazes my arm. And my shots are a little inconsistent and a little wobbly. You start noticing how straight that arrow will fly. If it wasn't shot straight, it won't fly straight. But because of the archer's paradox, which is the natural wavering of the arrow, you'll see how like exaggerated or reduced it is by the way that you shoot and you watch that arrow fly to the target. And if you shot wrong, you'll see that arrow kind of wobble in the air. If it was a correct shot, that arrow is like minimally moving, left and right, just kind of barely vibrating straight to the target. And if you pay close enough attention and keep watching the target past the point the arrow strikes it, you'll see that the arrow will try to straighten itself up on a bad shot the moment before it hits the target. So that's a great indicator too, to let you know something was wrong. That arrow was not flying straight. You start noticing these things because of the repetition over and over and over again. You're like, wait a minute. Your brain will subconsciously pick up on what shots feel good and what shots that felt good look like, and the shots that feel bad and what they look like. And you start making these minor adjustments. I'm still too new at this to have adjustments subconsciously made, but you'll start noticing them. So this is the last clip replayed in slow motion so that you can see, just like in the other videos, all of those very small movements being made. You should have your stance done and planted before you raise that bow up. So I did good here. I raised the bow, then I drew back. The elbow is not quite in line with that arrow. And I came forward some in the shot before I released. Now that was a better release. My hand did pop back naturally. You saw the relaxed hand drop, and so that was good. That has been an improvement over the last couple of weeks. It's still not consistent, but it is an improvement. And things like this take time. You don't become, the best archer overnight. Elbow still a little forward. And I was unstable with the bow hand. I moved to the right after the shot. So with some improvement in form, I had improvement in accuracy and grouping. So I'm still off, as you see. And you can always feel when a shot was bad. But for the most part, they were so minor, it didn't affect much. That was still a very good score for that round. And then that's a comparison from today's target and then the target I had for the second day I ever shot the bow. We're moving on to day 3. And there's my target. Still kind of shooting the same way. Now I'm a little low. I have a little spotter dot there to help eliminate one more thing for me to focus on. So that's what I started doing, is that if I noticed something that was inconsistent but I can control it, I would eliminate it and make sure it was consistent. This was a Robin Hood. Everybody gets excited about Robin Hoods, but I didn't, because it was unintentional, and all that happened was 10 arrows and too tight a space. So I ended up reducing back down to 5 arrows each round for 20 rounds on day 4. So some say go further distance, but my grouping's still inconsistently consistent, so I was not ready for a 15 yards. And I found my stance, so I took a photo of it. It's a slightly modified stance, and there's the way I look in that stance, as good as possible when trying to take a selfie, how I'm in line with the target. And that's how I was shooting. So much tighter group. Much, much tighter group. Again, we're into the 5-arrow rounds to prevent or reduce the likelihood of hitting a Robin Hood with too many arrows in one place. I was already starting to hear fletchings hit and arrow shafts hit. So my groupings were much tighter. And this is day 5. So I'm starting to become more consistently consistent, but there's still a lot of inconsistency there. So we're going on day 6. Much more grouping in the center target. They still get away from me, but I'm starting to hone in on center target. Then I got invited to check out league night at the club or the range. And so I shot that. It was 20-yard distances and everything. It was 30 arrows. And I didn't do too bad. 180 points, I got 70. Not bad for my first day. Then we're on the day 7. This is the final day. I couldn't last beyond this. So a lot more, but you see the spread is starting to happen. I was starting to get muscle fatigue in my bow arm, and then my hand here, the glove was just tearing up my hand too. So that's my middle finger. So anyway, thanks so much, and listen to my final thoughts. Hey everyone, I'm sitting here on day 2 after I ended the 100 arrows a day for 30 days challenge. I was hoping to make it all 30 days, but a little bit of being a little overzealous and kind of doing too many arrows on some days, more than just the 100, as well as my physical limitations kind of had me stop really the first weekend. I had been shooting 8 days straight, starting on the 22nd, even though I started the challenge, or no, on the 23rd, excuse me, even though I started the challenge on the 24th. So between those 8 days, I had actually been shooting anywhere between 14 to 1500 arrows, when I should have only been shooting 700 to 800 arrows and a 3,000 arrow challenge over a period of 30 days. So I've been real excited about this. I was my mindset was like, okay, I'm starting to figure things out with the way I work, the way the bow works and everything. And so I kind of wanted to keep that train of thought going. And so I got to the point where I had muscle fatigue in my bow arm, and then I was starting to have pain in my release fingers. A few things with that led me to find a revelation for myself. I believe this may go for others, but anyway, it's worth a shot at trying. So other than that, I'll discuss that here in a minute. But other than that, I think it went well. As you see in the previous slides of the video, that my groupings became more consistent and a lot tighter. There were more center target shots than there had been since I'd been shooting technically since May 3rd, and here we are June 1st. And so I think there's a lot of benefits to doing a 30-day challenge. 100 arrows a day may be too much for those of you that are just getting started. It might have been too much for me, and it certainly was the first week, the week that I bought the bow. I could not do 100 arrows. I was starting to fatigue. My spread on the target was starting to get a little wider. And then the obvious thing for me is whenever I overshoot a 10-yard target bail. So everything that I did with the target, the distance, with the challenge, the distance is at 10 yards. The league night photos that I posted in the previous slides of the video, that was at 20 yards. At first, I was not able to hit 20 yards very easily. I could not draw enough power out of that 25-pound bow because of my strength limitations. And after learning a few tricks with the personal coaching session that I had following the group session that I posted in the week 2 video, that I was able to at least get to that 20-yard bail and mount the arrow in it, even though I wasn't really accurate. Before then, I was hitting the 20 yards only because it was an accident and I was tired. So I aimed too high on the 10-yard bail and hit that 20-yard bail. So I knew it was possible. It was just tough for me. So that was great. I made a lot of progress that way. I can now hit the 20-yard bails, and I can hit targets. There's a few little tweaks that I need to work out, but I'm not going to rush myself. My goal was to stay at the 10-yard line and get proficient at it. And then once I got the arrow groupings under control and consistently consistent, then I would move to the 15-yard line and then do the same thing there, and then move to the 20-yard line and do the same thing there. So until I caught my proficiency up and I became consistently consistent at each of those distances. So as the further out you go, the more strength it takes to draw the string. Different hand placements and things like that too are taken into account. There's string walking. If you do the 3 under, there's the face walking, whether you do the 3 under, the split release, or the draw. And so there's a few other things too that can affect the distance at which the arrow flies, and how much power that the bow is putting behind that arrow when you release the string. So I was real excited that 100 arrows a day became pretty easy for me in week 3. Other than the muscle fatigue, I was really feeling the top trap muscle here, and even a little bit over here as other muscles were starting to fail. So I feel some progress. Some muscles in the back were hurting as well, which is good because that's that back tension you need. And then, of course, stabilizing the bow up, I had my arm here and my deltoids, and then right here starting to fail. So I've already gained a little bit of muscle. You can't see too much on the video, especially in this format. But I have had some muscle development in my arms anyway, because like I have said in my first video that I am, I do sprints, so I can do a lot of heavy lifting, but not for very long. So it's kind of like sheer drive to move something. And so I do have some strength in my arms and my legs and my core, but not so much to have that endurance. So then it's like after I get through doing what I need to do, I go back to doing computer work. So that's kind of been my life for the several years. So but through archery and everything, I'm working on that, and that is definitely a great side effect of being able to get into archery. You work all these different muscles from your head literally through your toes. So the more you do it and the longer you do it, you'll start seeing benefits as long as you don't overeat your calories. So we get real hungry. I certainly did. I've been ravished. But I promised myself the only thing that I'm doing is that I am increasing my protein intake. And then I had developed a major sweet tooth, and I went to fruit instead, and I didn't eat a whole lot of it, just enough to kind of satisfy me. And because we do need all of that too, especially when we're developing muscles and building muscles. A lot of the muscles that we use in archery are not necessarily muscles that we use every day beyond just merely existing and moving naturally. So you will feel some strange pains. You may feel a little worried here and there, but that's okay. Just take your break, rest, recover, eat well, and ice down if you need to. Always go to the rice by resting, and then ice down, compress and elevate. So that's one thing that'll help get you through muscle fatigue, or even sometimes tendon pulls. That'll happen. So we really got to take care of our rotator cuffs because that's the major point of injury in archery. So we don't want to overdo it. We can do that. And then especially for us new ones, we're having an issue getting this elbow pointed out and then parallel to the ground. That's kind of a new movement for us, and you do feel it in your shoulder. So those tendons are not used to moving that way in most cases. So we usually have where the inner elbow is pointing up and the outer elbow is pointing down to the ground. That's a very natural, thing for us to do. So when we rotate our arms, we're having to rotate those muscles and those tendons and that joint a little. So it becomes uncomfortable, and you can start feeling some discomfort, and that happened with me too. So that's natural, but again, don't push through it. Take your breaks, rest it, ice it, and that sort of thing, and get through it, and then develop it as you go. So you may be hitting your arms a lot too. As you see, this last week I wasn't hitting my arms so much. So I was starting to develop bruises right in this area and on the forearm. Even though I was rotating my elbow, it's getting to the point now where whenever I stretch out my arm, my elbow wants to start rotating. And so that's good. And I always made sure, because we don't want too many bruises, and a lot of those severe purple bruises, we've got to be careful because we have some major veins and arteries running through our arms. So if they take on too much damage and infection starts setting in, we can go into sepsis too. So as well as damaging these blood vessels and arteries that run in our arms. So you really, even with an arm guard, you can still damage your arm and get those bruises as I showed you. So you really, for safety reasons and health reasons, your number one thing you need to do is make sure you rotate this arm, your bow arm, to where your elbow is pointing out, not down. Okay? So since I was focusing on that, I quit having the bruising right here at my inner elbow. But I started having it on my forearm. And I learned what that was caused by was two things. It was the way that I was gripping the bow, so I didn't leave these fingers loose, and just enough tension here, between the index finger and the thumb, with that grip sitting right here in the webbing between the lifeline and the thumb. Okay, so that's all you need is the pressure there, because whenever you pull back on the string, then it's like a rubber band, like I was saying in another video. You pull back on the string, and that keeps the bow in your hand. And so I was afraid that I needed to hang on to it, because I didn't know how to control it. I didn't know how it behaved. So I quit hanging on to it. And whenever I released the string, I would grip it. And because I didn't want to drop the bow, I didn't have, well, I have, but I haven't used the finger slings that go on your index finger and your thumb of your bow hand to help catch the bow, which you see a lot of Olympic recurve bow shooters do. And so that's what I was doing, and not only were my arrows going left and right, I was also getting hit with the string. So I quit doing that, and I would just let it go. And one of the guys at the range was saying, because I asked him why, well, we're going to drop the bow, right? He said, let instinct take care of that, because once you shot that bow, and that bow goes, that arrow, and that arrow leaves the bow, and that bow goes to drop, your natural instinct will be to catch that bow. And so I started focusing on that more, and that's why you see more of that front and back movement of the bow instead of the side-to-side vibration so much. And so the bow is much more free to rock in my hand right here. And then, so anyway, whenever I did that, and then once that arrow left the bow, then I was able to catch it. I wasn't even thinking about it, because it's just instinct. You don't want to drop what you're holding on to, right? So that's what I did. So anyway, and then the other thing that I noticed was that pulling back on the string, if you pull to the right and you're a right-handed shooter, and you pull that string slightly to the right, that arrow is going to flip off that rest or the shelf of the bow, whichever way you're shooting, just like if you pinch the nock when you're doing the split hook. So I noticed that I was doing that. It's almost like a plucking action. So whenever I would release, even if the arrow didn't swing out, because I didn't move it enough for that to happen, that when I released, there was a lot of back, side to side movement and vibration of that string. And because it's so close to my arm, because I have the string right here up against my chest and right along my arm, that side to side movement and vibration of the string would hit and graze my arm too. So getting rid of those two things, the gripping and then the slight angled draw of the string, when those things are not happening, it's loose and I'm pulling directly back, I don't hit my forearm. So that's also another trick too. Everybody says just turn your elbow. Yes, but that's just one part of the equation, because then once you get that strength, and that form down right, then it's going to affect you in other ways that you may be more weak in. So then those are things that you need to work on then to help prevent those kind of injuries from happening. So that was a great thing that I learned. I was excited that with a little bit more practice, and after realizing that after so many shots, that this final week I'm clear. There isn't much injury to my arm at all. So I think it was really good. I'm really proud of my groupings. By the last day, because my fingers were hurting so bad, I literally lost a little bit of feeling in my ring finger of my release hand, which is my right hand, and but it's back now. But it was almost like it was starting to blister. If anybody has ever played any stringed instruments, like an orchestra or guitars and things like that, your left hand tips will start getting a little numb, and they can start blistering from those metal strings that you're fretting and all. And it's kind of the same feeling. And so that's what was happening. And then I noticed, and you see the last photo that I shared with my middle finger, I have not gained feeling back in it yet, but you saw that along the outer edge of my middle finger there was an indentation, And yeah, my right hand gets a little dirty using that glove, but that indention's finally starting to be less visible on day 2 of resting from shooting. And so I thought, well, what on earth is going on? And I already knew that the seams on the inside of the glove at the fingertips were starting to irritate me. Now, you're supposed to have a pretty snug gloves. It shouldn't be too much material at the tip. It shouldn't be too tight either. And yes, our hands do swell. So you don't want it to be too tight, and you want a very natural fit on the glove. Well, with me, I have small hands, and I can literally fit in a small youth baseball glove. Like, no joke. Oh, I don't have it here. I'll show you another day when we go over that, the different types of finger protection and stuff. But so I had the small Archer glove, and it was still too big where the tips were, I could kind of pinch the tips a little, and the seams were rubbing on my fingers. But I have long fingers, and so the pad ended up being too short, so I had to stretch it so it would wrap around my wrist like it's supposed to. So I noticed that that was an issue, and it was really starting to hurt my hand, my fingers, on the last day. So I went and raced to the sporting goods store and tried finding an archery glove. I didn't find anything that was more suitable to what I was thinking I might like. The pro shop area of the range, the local shop, didn't have anything. I even went to the firearms ranges too to check to see if there might be some shooting gloves over there that might work. I went everywhere, and even at a sporting goods store, I thought maybe it might work, and so I got those baseball gloves, and yeah, it works. It fits my hand like it should, but there wasn't enough padding to protect the fingertips from drawing that string back. Since I was already hurting, it was I might as well have been pulling the string back with my bare fingers. So I didn't have much protection from the pain, And so I started thinking, and I tried the pull tab again. I don't like the release of the pull tab. Many people use them, or the finger tab, so to speak. Many people use them. I don't. Even a small can be too big for my palm, and I end up, with my anchor and all, I'm either hitting my cheek, or I'll hit around here if I'm anchoring lower. Even on clean releases, and I've been working on that. The slow-mo video kind of shows that my release is a little bit more clean. I'm following through more naturally instead of going, oh, I need to pull it back. No, you just let it pop back. And so even when that was happening, I was still hitting myself, or I was having to drop the tab, and even though it was on my hand snug, I did not feel like I had a clean release. So again, I'm new to all of this. Some take to that tab a lot better than I do, so it just I didn't have the feel on it that I liked, and the release of the string was dirtier than it is with a glove. So I just kept thinking, what am I going to do? And so I ended up taping my fingers. I had taped my fingers before for work, with a job in my past life, and because my fingers hurt real bad because I was pulling these plastic strings out of these hoses so I could hang them. So I ended up taping my fingers to save the skin on my fingers. I was developing blisters, almost bleeding, and so I was like, well, let me see, the string isn't as thin as that, and it's certainly not plastic, even though it is nylon. So I was like, well, let me see, and I taped my fingers, and it is amazing how big of a difference taping the fingers makes when shooting the bow. I think it's also, I've shot barehanded before too. It's very uncomfortable for me. I don't have much padding in my little fingers, but I got some pretty interesting results out of that bow. So that's what I think I'm going to be shooting with in the future, is trying out the finger tape method. Like I said in the first video, that finger taping is an improved form of finger protection according to the World Archery Rule Book. So if you're wanting to compete, just know that no matter what anybody says at your local archery shops and clubs and things, that you can use finger tape according to World Archery. Now, those that are like under FIDA or I think it's like NFAA, some of the other federations, I don't know how close they are with the World Archery, but I have gone through FIDA's, FITA's rule book or coaching manual, really, and it didn't really address finger protection. It was more about form and things and what should be. But definitely, it's kind of one of those things that if the World Archery will allow it, then that's what I'm going to try. And even so, if you don't plan on competing, you don't know where you may go. So it's kind of always good to kind of keep, the rules of competition in mind, just in case you get the opportunity, just in case you get the kind of itch to go do it and see how you do and all. Or if you need a challenge and in your shooting, you're like, I think I can go spend $20, $30, $40 and go compete in my local competition. Just know, keeping those rules in mind and your setup and everything kind of tailored to that, then it'd be like just going to your local range or shooting in your backyard. Once you get over to competition, you're just shooting with other people, and it's limited rounds. So it's pretty much the same thing. So there's nothing new for you to really learn. There's nothing new for you to adjust to. When it comes to recurve, there are different styles. It's like a limpet recurve shooting. You've got the stabilizers, the sights and everything. Then you have bare bow without the stabilizers and sights. I believe you can only have a plunger and some weights, maybe a string silencer, I'm not sure. And then you have instinctive. According to the World Archery rule book, instinctive doesn't use the weights, doesn't use the sights, doesn't use anything other than you. So really what I'm doing technically is instinctive style shooting. So I have to, you can't use range finders or anything like that. So I have to actually calculate all of that information myself in order to make the shot that I want to make. So I've learned a lot in this past month. It hasn't even been a month yet since I bought it, 2 more days. And so I'm real excited. A lot of people have been fairly impressed with my progress and all. A lot have been interested when I tell them how long I've been shooting, because they're asking me. I get a little uncomfortable that I've only been shooting for a month and it's not consecutive except for this past week, this last 8 days. So the time before that, the most consecutive that I got was 3 days, and I was down for 2 days because that was tough on me. So that was within the first 2 weeks that I got the bow. So anyway, it's been a learning process when it comes to the challenge, for me at least. I think that I will use it not as recreation, but as a form of working on issues, doing general assessment of see where I'm at in my shooting capabilities, my strength, endurance, and things like that. And also, to try to troubleshoot some things that may be going a little awry, in addition to another personal coaching sessions. So I think it's really great. If you can't do 100 arrows a day, then that's okay. Do 10, 20, 30, then that would be good. It's a great way to kind of keep you in the spirit of wanting to shoot. You block out your time, it becomes regular, it becomes a habit, it becomes a part of your life. So anyway, so I think it's really neat. You'll learn a lot about yourself. You'll learn a lot about your bow too, and then you'll start figuring out the ways that will work best for you and your equipment. So anyway, I think it was really fun. I'm glad that I decided to do such a thing, and I definitely recommend you trying something, even if it's a modified version. It's amazing what you'll learn and how fast you'll learn it. So anyway, thanks for being with me with my journey so far. The first month, I look forward to providing more videos like this, hopefully not as rough as the first ones. I was trying to compile everything together, and so I'll definitely pass on the information that I've learned along the way through trial and error, as well as online. And you can also visit my playlist too on my channel, and then you can see what others have said too for the traditional recurves. Some of the sporting recurves, like the target competition recurves, like the bare bow, and even the Olympic recurves, some of those methods will transfer over to the traditional recurve, or even instinctive shooting. Some things they're the same. So I've added those to a playlist too, and because they'll be beneficial to kind of just know what's going on out there. Might be something for you to try. Everybody has their own take on everything. Everybody has their opinions. What may work for one may not work for the other. So anyway, feel free to browse those. They're great, popular creators online and everything, and they're great athletes in their own right. Some of them are Olympians and all. And so anyway, it's great information. It's a little hard sorting through the traditional to find the traditional recurve shooting tips and all, but so anyway, I hope to be a resource for that. And if I can compile what I find online on this channel and all, then I'll be glad to do that, and just go over to my playlist and you'll find it all there. So anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm real excited, and I look forward to seeing all of you on the range and out in the field again. And I'll be back in a little while with a new video for y'all.